Isaiah Dorman's life is a tale of courage, complexity, and tragedy that defies conventional narratives of the American West. Known as the only African-American killed at the infamous Battle of the Little Bighorn on June 25, 1876, Dorman's story intertwines with the lives of Native Americans, U.S. soldiers, and the harsh realities of frontier life. Born free in Pennsylvania around 1832 to an African-Jamaican father and a mixed Black and Delaware Indian mother, Dorman's early life remains shrouded in uncertainty. Some accounts suggest he may have been a runaway slave, though evidence points to his freedom from birth. By the 1850s, he had ventured westward, settling in Dakota Territory and immersing himself in Native American culture. Known to the Lakota as Azimpi, Buffalo Teat, he married Celeste St. Pierre, a Santee Sioux woman, and lived among her people as a trader and trapper. Dorman's unique position as a bridge between cultures led him to serve as an interpreter for the U.S. Army during the Indian Wars. His final role was with Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer's 7th Cavalry during their ill-fated expedition against the Sioux and Cheyenne. On that fateful day at Little Bighorn, Dorman fought valiantly alongside Major Reno's column, but was ultimately overwhelmed during Reno's retreat. Accounts of his death are harrowing. His horse fell, trapping him, yet he continued firing until captured. Eyewitnesses report that he was tortured and mutilated by Native women who saw him as a traitor for siding with the U.S. Army. Despite these grim details, Dorman's legacy has been preserved through research and storytelling efforts like those of Lila Morton Pengra, who spent over 15 years uncovering his life's intricacies. Her work challenges stereotypes and corrects historical misconceptions, revealing Dorman as a man whose life was far richer and more complex than previously understood. Isaiah Dorman stands as a poignant reminder of the diverse experiences that shaped the American frontier, a man caught between worlds whose bravery and humanity endure in history's memory. This leads us to the central theme of this video. Will the genuine Isaiah please come forward? A search for images of Isaiah Dorman on Google yields several results. But how can we ascertain their authenticity? One method to verify these images is to investigate the time and location of each photograph and confirm whether Isaiah was present at those moments. To summarize, Isaiah was born a free man on Water Street in Pennsylvania. He contributed to the construction of Fort Ridgely in the Dakota Territory and married his Dakota wife there. Isaiah was employed as a servant by Captain Alfred Sully, accompanying him to Fort Kearny in the Nebraska Territory, participating in the Civil War in Virginia, and eventually returning with Sully to the Dakota Territory, where he fought at Whitestone Hill and Killdeer Mountain. He engaged in various activities, including chopping wood with a Durfee and Peck, building a home further along the Missouri River, delivering mail for the Army to Fort Wadsworth, serving as a guide for the 1871 Northern Pacific Railroad Survey, and ultimately working as an interpreter at Fort Rice from 1871 to 1876. All of these experiences culminated in the significant summer of 1876. There are numerous verified physical descriptions of Isaiah. According to the Cheyenne wooden leg, he was a large man, which may imply that Isaiah was robust, muscular, and tall. However, it is important to note that wooden leg was interviewed using Indian Sign Language. The sign for big can convey two meanings: physically large or socially significant. Lila suggests that wooden leg intended to convey that Isaiah held importance, as the Dakota people needed to rely on interpreters to accurately communicate their concerns and to clarify the messages from fort and expedition commanders, particularly during treaty signings and battles. A quote from Sitting Bull illustrates the social interpretation of big man. Before I left my mother's insides, the God Almighty must have told me to think that I would be the judge of all the Indians, a big man to decide for them. The Dakota often referred to Isaiah by the nickname Black Hawk. A staff writer for the New York Herald characterized Black Hawk as ignorant, dizzy, and immoral. Regrettably, I must mention that he was a full-blooded Negro. Could this individual be Isaiah? In his book, Custer's Black Man, William Boyes noted that there are no known photographs of Isaiah Dorman, and only two descriptions of his physical appearance exist, both provided by hostile Native Americans who depicted him as a large and very dark-skinned man. Boyes compiled all the information available about Isaiah at that time. However, new primary documents have recently come to light. Lila discovered that another black man living along the upper Missouri River, named Peter Frank, was also referred to as Black Hawk. Peter Frank, a freed slave of an early trader, worked as an interpreter, particularly at Fort Berthold and later at Fort Yates. He was described as large and dark-skinned, and to complicate matters further, both he and Isaiah were married to sisters, making them brothers-in-law according to Lakota kinship. Peter Frank had a penchant for drinking and was heavily involved in the whiskey trade, while Isaiah Dorman maintained sobriety and opposed the whiskey trade. Peter Frank was known for his dark complexion and was later reputed to be the strongest man on the reservation, whereas Dorman was lighter-skinned. Theodore Golden noted that Dorman's father was believed to be a Jamaican Negro and his mother a Native American woman. Thunder Bear referred to Isaiah as a black man of mixed heritage, and Robert Maskell Patterson, in his memoirs of the 1871 Northern Pacific Railroad Survey, described Isaiah as half Indian and half Negro. Army servant vouchers requesting reimbursement for Isaiah's employment at Fort Ridgely in the Minnesota Territory and Fort Kearny in the Nebraska Territory recorded similar details about him. He was noted to have black hair, black eyes, and a complexion that varied from light black to black, standing between 5 feet 10 inches and 6 feet tall, with woolly or curly hair. In 1861, while Isaiah was serving as a servant for Alfred Sully, Sully wrote to his sister about the mail carrier delivering a bundle. "The leggings are impractical in mud that reaches the horse's knees, and I am unable to pull them over my bulky riding boots. Therefore, I have given them to Isaiah. He has removed the feet and intends to wear them as Indian leggings. He will certainly stand out, as his legs are quite crooked." Isaiah's leg deformities may have resulted from rickets due to a vitamin D deficiency, likely stemming from insufficient sunlight during his childhood, possibly because his home in the narrow valley of Water Street, Pennsylvania, was overshadowed by numerous trees and affected by the smog from coal furnaces during the early Industrial Revolution. This photograph is frequently claimed to depict Isaiah. However, it was taken by J.C.H. Gabriel and features a member of the 25th Infantry of Buffalo Soldiers who were stationed with the 7th Cavalry at Fort Meade near Sturgis, Dakota Territory, sometime between 1880 and 1886, indicating that it was captured after Isaiah Dorman's passing. Isaiah's crooked legs may have hindered his ability to ride effectively, as there are at least 3 records of him falling from his horse. Nevertheless, he managed to complete 2 round trips of 420 miles in the winter of 1866 and 1867, transporting military mail through deep snow between Fort Rice and Wadsworth. He may have opted to walk due to his poor horsemanship resulting from his leg condition. I sincerely hope he possessed a buffalo coat similar to that of the individual in the photograph. Additionally, there is another intriguing photograph that is often said to feature Isaiah at the center of a group of men. The saloon is typically identified as being in Fort Abraham Lincoln or Mandan, but there are discrepancies. The black man in the image does not align with Lila's findings regarding a light-skinned, mixed-race man with curly hair and crooked legs. Furthermore, Isaiah served as an interpreter at Fort Rice, not Fort Lincoln, and Mandan was established in 1879 after Dorman's death. Notably, Colonel Rodney Thomas, an expert in photo identification and Indian ledger art interpretation, has conducted some of the most thorough investigative work in this area. It has been noted that this photograph was taken after 1886, the year when Schlitz Brewing Company established its trademark, the belted globe. Material culture evidence suggests that this image cannot be of Isaiah Dorman. We now turn to a well-known photograph captured by William H. Illingworth during Custer's 1874 expedition to the Black Hills. In the first edition of his book, Black Pioneers, John Ravitch proposed that the individual standing in the background at the tent's corner might be Isaiah Dorman. This tentative hypothesis quickly gained traction and was accepted as fact. However, records from Fort Rice indicate that Dorman did not participate in the 1874 expedition. There were no Dakota scouts present during this expedition who would have required his translation services. Furthermore, a high-resolution scan and enlargement of the photograph conducted by Ernest Graft and Paul Horsted for their book, Crossing the Plains with Custer, revealed a white man partially obscured by his hat. Unfortunately, websites such as Find a Grave in Black Pass now display the cropped image of the man in shadow incorrectly labeling it as a photograph of Isaiah Dorman. Graft and Horsted stated that they never considered the possibility of Dorman being on the expedition, as it had not emerged in their research or in other publications, and he is not included in the expedition roster. Even Lila has made occasional errors. In her 2014 article in the Little Bighorn magazine, Greasy Grass, she suggested that the man on the far right of a photograph taken at Fort Berthold was Isaiah Dorman, citing the appearance of his legs and chest as indicative of rickets. She noted that his hair, visible beneath his hat, appeared curly, and he matched the height of 6 feet of others in the image. Additionally, Sully, his troops, and his servant Isaiah camped near Fort Berthold in 1865, the year this photograph was taken. However, circumstantial evidence is not always conclusive. In 2015, Mike Cowdery challenged Lila's identification, proposing that the man was Pierre, the interpreter at Fort Berthold. In 2019, Ephraim Dixon, in a North Dakota history article, identified the photographer as Byron Guernsey, not Alfred Sully, as Lila had mistakenly believed. Here is a photograph of Garrot taken in 1881, along with an excerpt from a letter written by Larned after his visit to Fort Berthold in the 1860s. In this letter, he recounts an incident in which Garrot, a post-trader and interpreter, managed to escape from a group of warriors. Garrot had a shotgun that he had modified to a length of 6.5 inches, which he carried around his neck, concealed by his hunting shirt and neckerchief. This detail may account for the bulge observed in his shirt rather than rickets. Illustrations can also present challenges. Author Robert Edge characterized Isaiah as large and very dark-skinned, wearing a straw hat and smoking a corncob pipe. We have previously explored the origins of the description, big and very black. However, Lila's extensive research has not uncovered any written references to a straw hat or corncob pipe outside of fictional narratives. Edge also suggested that Isaiah was a runaway slave from Louisiana, but that is a topic for another discussion. Now, here is an intriguing discovery. Recall that Isaiah served as a servant to General Alfred Sully for many years. Alfred was the son of the renowned painter Thomas Sully and was himself a skilled amateur artist. His grandson, Langdon Sully, authored a biography titled No Tears for the General, in which he noted that Alfred was primarily concerned with his horse and his servant. Here is a self-portrait painted by Alfred Sully towards the end of his life, depicting him alongside a horse and a man lounging in the background. This figure could potentially be his servant, Isaiah. A closer examination of the shadowy figure suggests he may be wearing a straw hat. Perhaps future discoveries of diaries and reports will clarify the mystery surrounding the straw hat and corncob pipe. Research is an ongoing journey, and if anyone is likely to uncover the truth, it is likely to be Lila. I find this topic particularly enjoyable to explore. Here is another illustration that frequently appears on websites purporting to narrate the story of Isaiah Dorman. This sketch, created by Sam Patrick, was designed to accompany an article written by George Reasons. Both the article and the illustration were published in newspapers throughout the United States during the 1970s, when the two collaborated on a syndicated column. Lila recounted how she gazed at this sketch repeatedly until it became etched in her memory. During a visit to Hardin for the Custer Battlefield Historical and Museum Association conference, she spent time at the Bighorn County Library exploring their collection of Custer-related materials. While perusing Lawrence Frost's The Custer album, she instantly recognized the origin of this specific sketch. When comparing these images side by side, the resemblances are quite pronounced. I experimented with the transparency, similar to techniques I have used in previous videos. By overlaying the photograph of George Custer onto the image of Isaiah Dorman, the alignment becomes evident. I will highlight this in red for clarity. It's astonishing, isn't it? It seems that the artist was not only inspired by the photograph of Custer, but may have actually traced it. Here is the Dorman sketch once more. Isn't it remarkable? Great observation, Lila. While we may not have uncovered a photograph or an authentic sketch of Isaiah Dorman, our efforts to challenge the myths and stereotypes surrounding his image have allowed us to better visualize him. One of my favorite excerpts from Lila's book captures the essence of Isaiah and his life, helping me to envision him more vividly. That year, Raising horses became lucrative as the 7th Cavalry moved west to establish a garrison at Fort Rice and to construct Fort Abraham Lincoln further along the Missouri River. Dorman's son, Baptiste, raised American horses for sale to the Army and continued to sell cordwood for several years. The Dorman residence was situated on a prominent bluff that overlooked the Missouri River, which experienced seasonal flooding in the spring. However, the river's current was mitigated by a bend and several islands located upstream from Willow Creek. This resulted in the accumulation of nutrient-rich silt in the lowlands, which nourished a substantial vegetable garden and multiple cornfields. On the bluff, Isaiah and his sons cultivated patches of oats and barley for their horses and harvested hay. They also engaged in fishing, hunting, and trapping to secure food and pelts. Over the course of his first decade in Dakota Territory, Dorman evolved from a young man living with his wife and small children to a seasoned individual who had worked as a servant, mail carrier, woodhawk, and guide. By 1873, he had established a horse ranch alongside his wife and their adult son. While it is important to acknowledge Dorman's life in its entirety, my focus here is primarily on the Battle of the Little Bighorn, which necessitates mentioning his untimely death on June 25, 1876. These aspects of his life encapsulate his character as effectively as any photograph, and I will now read a passage from Lila's book. At the age of 44, Dorman was no longer in his youth. Despite having crooked legs, he had successfully navigated the challenges of earning a living and supporting his family on the demanding western frontier, where physical endurance was essential. He had set up tents, prepared meals, and packed supplies for others. He had chopped wood, delivered mail, and guided soldiers. Ultimately, it was his expertise and understanding of the Lakota language and culture that led him to this pivotal moment. As previously noted, Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer instructed Major Marcus Reno and his troops to advance into the valley. This order was conveyed by his adjutant, Lieutenant William Weiner Cook, who stated, "The Indians are approximately 2.5 miles ahead. They are on the move. Proceed as swiftly as you deem appropriate and engage them wherever you encounter them, and Custer will provide support." Reno complied with this directive, leading companies A, M, and G, along with the Indian scouts, who then halted to establish a skirmish line in the valley. Civilian personnel, including Bloody Knife, Scouts, Charlie Reynolds, and Isaiah Dorman, were not anticipated to participate in the frontline combat. As the Native American warriors advanced from their villages, Reno's skirmish line and others took cover in a wooded area. Shortly thereafter, fearing that the warriors had penetrated the timber, Reno commanded a retreat. This led to a disorganized and tumultuous withdrawal. Isaiah Dorman exited the timber, only to have his horse shot moments later. Private Roman Rutten recounted the subsequent events. He observed Isaiah, who had taken a knee and was calmly firing his sporting rifle at the approaching Indians. As Rutten passed by, Isaiah called out to him, bidding farewell. In a letter, Rutten later noted that Bloody Knife, Isaiah, and Charlie Reynolds were killed just 50 feet apart, right outside the woods. Additionally, there is another perspective on the retreat, which features 2 X's marking Reynolds' position. The marker labeled Reynolds' Pipe was the earlier designation made by Little Bighorn researcher Walter Camp. You can observe that this location is somewhat closer to Dorman. At the same time, George Herendeen, a scout who remained in the timber, witnessed the events that transpired. He recounted that Isaiah was killed shortly after emerging from the timber, not far from Charlie Reynolds. Charlie had advanced approximately 150 yards when he was shot, and Isaiah fell nearby. While I was in the timber, I witnessed Native Americans firing at Isaiah and women striking him with stone hammers. His legs below the knees were riddled with bullets, spaced only an inch or 2 apart. It was not until June 25, 1983, that a white marker was finally revealed. It commemorates Isaiah Dorman, interpreter, who fell in this vicinity on June 25, 1876. The reverse side states that it was donated by the Adolph Coors Company and the Barney Ford Memorial Association, which is an advocacy group for African Americans in Colorado. Isaiah's marker is situated in the center of a pasture and is surrounded by a pipe fence to safeguard it from cattle. Isaiah Dorman is also commemorated on the monument at Last Stand Hill, though regrettably, he is identified only by his first name. That concludes our discussion for now. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe for more content like this.